Okay, so we all saw it, right? In the 1v1 for number 1, Nas versus Friga in NextChapter pay-per-view, Nas obliterated Friga in an absolute stunner, like 30-7 blowout. And that was quite an unexpected result for, I would say, overwhelming majority of people. Like, I definitely thought Friga would at least get more than 10. So yeah, now that the game's out, I kind of want to look back and break it down, analyze pretty in depth how exactly Nas realized this outcome where he just destroyed Friga. And I'm going to divide the analysis into the mechanical dimension of the game and the mental dimension of the game. So starting with the mechanical dimension, I think the first big pattern you saw throughout the game was that Nas didn't let Friga face up. Like, Friga was faced away like 90% of the time. Like, this is the first possession where you can really see how Friga catches the ball. And yeah, you see right here, he's not faced towards the rim. He's faced away to the left. And then after that, Friga catches, and now again he's faced away to the right this time. And yeah, it's you just saw it throughout the game. Like, if you go to the last possessions of the game, he, like, after the catch sort of faced up a little more, but look, like how he's catching the ball, he's struggling to throughout the game, he was just struggling to face up. And this was really largely a product of Nas's defense and also some deficiencies, limitations on Friga's game. But not being able to face up was really huge in the outcome because a lot of Friga's best options kind of need a face up setup. So like Friga's rocker step, like the rip through and rocker step to the right. So right here you can kind of see Friga similarly doesn't start faced up, and there's the rocker step. Similarly doesn't start faced up, but he's able to face up afterwards. And then rocker step, and yeah, there you go. And then Friga also does these floats to the side. That's a huge part of his game. In fact, in the rematch against Nas, you saw him doing that a lot. But yeah, these floats to the side, these lateral floats, I don't think you maybe necessarily require a face up to get that move off, but it would be very awkward. So yeah, so Friga couldn't really get to his lateral floats, and those lateral floats set up a lot of his options. Like right there, you saw it set up his hezi. So when Nas like denied the face up, it took away like a lot of Friga's go-tos. It took away his rocker step, his rip through, and the lateral float to the side, which sets up a ton of other counters. And then, of course, how could I forget Friga's sidestep, particularly to the right? That's also out of a float, which again, he pretty much only does out of a face-up. So when Friga couldn't face up, he didn't have the rip through and rocker step to the right. He didn't have the lateral floats, which unlock his hezi, his signature side steps. He got denied of a lot of his options by not being allowed to face up, by Nas denying the face up. So how exactly did Nas deny Friga from facing up so well? Well, the first part is that Nas crowded Friga before the catch. That was a big part. Nas crowded Friga on the catch. So right there, yeah, you can see it right here particularly. Yeah, so look how, like, before Friga even catches the ball, Nas is already like has his chest on him pretty much. Which means Friga can't just casually catch the ball while facing Nas, because then the ball will just be right in front of Nas. It'll be exposed to him. So Nas's early pressure made him a threat to poke the ball and force a turnover once Friga caught it, and this compelled Friga to catch the ball facing away. Friga tried to adjust by creating space as he's catching the ball. Like here, he steps out to catch it, but Nas stays closely attached. Then he even tries to spring out to catch it, but Nas jumps out to follow him. This really showed how intent Nas was on crowding Friga on the catch. Another reason Nas's pressure before the catch is significant because, right, shots like that right there, Friga likes to catch the defender off guard, and if the ball is checked and the defender's not up yet, he'll just launch it immediately. So that's a good example right there. Right here is another good example. Friga catches the ball, and then before Yeah, before the camera can even react, really, he launches the shot up. And Friga's been doing this a while. Like, this is a old 1v1 versus Jay Jones, and yeah, right there, you saw it. Jay Jones checks the ball, and he's still walking up to Friga, and then Friga just, like, launches it. And I thought Jay Jones was actually getting kind of annoyed in that. It is, I can see it, an annoying tactic, but within the rule set, especially next chapter, it is legal. But yeah, so Nas's early pressure not only forced Friga to start faced away, he couldn't catch the ball faced up, but it also took away those sneaky quick shots Friga tries sometimes. So that's the first element. But beyond just not letting Friga start faced up, he had to keep Friga from facing up after he caught the ball. And the way Nas did that was he played Friga very tight after the catch. So Nas didn't just force Friga to start facing away, he made sure Friga kept facing away. This is a good contrast right here. So yeah, you can see it. Moon is up before Friga even catches the ball, so he doesn't catch the ball facing up. But then Moon doesn't stay tight enough to Friga after he catches the ball to prevent Friga from facing up afterwards. Whereas Nas, after Friga catches, he's playing even tighter than Moon was, and he has a top foot on Friga's right side, and he's very, very close up. What this does is, you can see right here, Nas's leg is right here. So Friga can't really face up, can't easily face up, because he has to move his foot over here. Like, he has to get his foot out here if he wants to face up, but Nas's leg is there, blocking Friga from doing that. So even after Friga caught the ball facing away from the rim, he couldn't face up afterwards because Nas is applying such intense pressure and sealing off Friga's right foot from moving up. When Friga did try to go right, he had to take very, very wide angles as a result. Like, you can see right here, imagine if Friga's right foot was here, so his left foot's here, right foot here, then he could take a straighter angle downhill. But because of the position Friga's right foot is in, when he drives, he can't just go straight downhill. He has to take this wide angle all the way out and kind of just run laterally. So yeah, you see it with this possession right here. Takes a very wide angle right. And then another good example is this possession here. Again, very wide right, not as wide, but still wide angle to the right. And then this possession right here is also a good example. Just wide angles when Friga tries to drive right. Another element of the game that prevented Friga from facing up was Naz's strength and active hands. So, like, this is a possession against Moon where Friga, yeah, catches the ball facing away. And then, but he's able to use his size and strength to kind of muscle space, muscle up some separation in the triple threat. So he gives Moon a little shoulder bump right here, and then that pushes Moon back enough that now he has some space, and then he claims that space to face up right here. And when Friga's facing away to the left, he does this jab a lot. Like, he jabs and bumps the defender with his right shoulder. He does that very often when he's facing away to the left. This clip is another example right here. Yeah, jabs into Moon's body, bump. Now against Nas, Friga didn't really have that option with the jab into the body bump because Nas is so strong that he can absorb that contact when Friga initiates it, and he has the active hands to, when Friga jabs into Nas's body, he brings the ball closer to Nas's body too. And that lets Nas get a hand on it, and because Nas is so strong, if he gets a hand on it, he's gonna be able to, like, rip it out. So, Nas's strength and active hands were also, a very problematic factor for Friga when he was trying to face up, and just attack out of the triple threat in general. Now, on top of Nas denying Friga the face-up, another big element of the game was that he studied and anticipated the options Friga would use when he wasn't able to face up. He kind of just knew everything else that Friga would try to do. So Friga really wasn't changing pace. I'll get into that more in the mental analysis of the matchup. But you can see right here, so like, Friga didn't really, once he would choose a direction and drive that way, he didn't really counter until he was really sealed off. So on this possession, yeah, Friga steps back, but it's because he has absolutely no lane to the rim. So right here, Friga counters out of the drive, but because he's trying to get space on the catch versus Nas. When he does this like stunt out to the ball and then Nas chases him out there and then he drives right, when he counters into the step back again, because he started so far out, instead of this being like kind of a mid-range shot, now he's taking a step back that looks like 27 feet. Actually, deeper than that, probably closer to 30. And then when Friga was at the rim, Nas was reading his inside hand finishes on the left side. Like, that's something you notice about Friga. Even on the left side, he always finishes with the right hand. And Nas really looked like he was just reading it the entire game. This possession right here, you see it again. Although, on that one, I don't know what else Friga could have really done. Like, I don't see how finishing with the left hand there makes it any easier. Maybe he just doesn't even try to go straight up into a finish at all, and instead maybe hits Nas with a pump fake or tries to finish on the other side of the rim with the right. But yeah, Nas really had a read on Friga's finishing tendencies at the rim. Here's another possession here. Friga gets a step going left, and then he still tries to finish it with the right hand. So if he goes up left here, he can bring the ball out and Nas can't reach across his body and then finish. But because he tries to go up with the right, the shoulder nearest to Nas, like, yeah, it's a foul. That is a foul. Yeah, that's a foul. Nas honestly, actually, did he... Hold on, did he get him on the face? I wonder if Nas, like, on the follow through gets Friga on the... Yeah, I feel like he did. So that's definitely a foul. And then look at Friga's reaction. He's in disbelief. But regardless, if Friga is more comfortable with his left hand, I think he finishes a few more layups at least. And then once you have the drive going, maybe Nas backs up a little bit, just eases up the pressure up slightly, and then that opens up a lot of Friga's other options the rest of his game. So, like I said, Friga spent almost the entire game not faced up. He was always faced away either to the left here, like here, or he would face away to the right. And I also said Nas was kind of sitting on every option Friga tried out of these triple threat setups where he's faced away to the left or faced away to the right. And when Friga was faced away to the left, he really had no move back to the right. When Friga was like this, he didn't have an option where he could just quickly counter to the right. He always either went left or slowly pivoted around back to the right. He didn't have that quick spin off where his right foot is here, say that it's planted, and then you push off and then like pivot around to the other side and then drive back right. And like it's a quick pivot. Right here, this is the move I'm talking about. Yeah, so right here. Yeah, push off that foot and then pivot to the other side, drive right. Friga doesn't... I've actually never really even seen him do that move, I don't think. But he definitely didn't do it against Nas. So, like, even just, like, one counter like that would diversify his game when he's faced away to the left, and now Nas has to respect his other options a little more. Because Nas was selling out on the left drive when Friga would face away to the left, because he knows that when Friga's faced away to the left like this, he never really counters back to the right. Instead, he either goes hard left or he does the jab bump into the body, or he'll like casually slowly pivot back to the right side and look for something else. So whenever Friga was in this like left face up position, you saw Nas selling out a lot. Like Nas sold out on this left drive a lot. Look how Nas's left foot is even inside Friga's left foot. Friga's left foot is like out here, and then Nas's is inside of that line. And I already touched on this, but when Friga was faced away to the right, like he is here, he almost always drove right. Like right here, Friga's faced away to the right, drives right, and as I said before, has to take a very wide angle. Right here, another possession, Friga's faced away to the right, and then just goes right, no change of pace, no counter. Right here, another possession, he's faced away to the right, drives right, and then has to take a very, very wide angle. And when you exclude possessions like these, where Friga tries to catch Nas off guard and pull a fast one, this was the only possession I could find where Friga drove right, and drives right from a stance where his right foot is ahead of his left. So, like, right here, if his right foot is further up than his left foot. Every other time, Friga is driving with his right foot. He's driving right with his right foot behind his left foot. Like, again, right here. He drives right out of this, but you can see his right foot is further back than his left foot. So when Friga faced away left, he very often drove left. And then when he faced away to the right, he almost always drove right, which all just made him very predictable. So here, Friga does something that you rarely see him do throughout the game. So he's faced away to the right, but instead of just driving straight right out of that, he's going to bring his right foot over and jab right, and then he's going to counter back to the left. So he actually changes directions, and he gets one of the better angles he sees throughout this game doing that.
North-south.
Yeah, right there. But the thing is, Friga rarely did this throughout the game. He rarely jabbed one direction and then countered back the other way. And it was a product of some limitations in Friga's game. Like, one, he's just less comfortable going left. When he's faced away to the left, one of his favorite options is that triple threat jab bump into the body, and that just wasn't working against Nas. And Nas throughout the game was just like blocking Friga's layups, chasing him down from behind at the rim when he tried to finish on the left side with the right hand, inside hand. But yeah, Friga throughout the game just wasn't using his jab to manipulate Nas's movement. That's why I say in some ways he beat himself too. I'll say more in the mental analysis, but a player of Friga's caliber should be able to get more than 7 points on Nas if he does everything right. And Nas was reacting to Friga's jabs. Like right here, Friga, he doesn't even jab, he jabs right, but it's not even very hard. And then Nas slides over and then gives up an angle going back left because of it. And he recovers well, but Friga scores. Right here, Friga doesn't even jab very hard right again, and then he gets that angle going left, gets all the way to the rim. One of his better angles driving whatsoever throughout the game. And yeah, if you look at this jab, it's it's not even a hard jab to the right, and look how Nas reacts. And like I said, when Friga faced away to the left, Nas would sell out on the left drive. So an option Friga, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but an option Friga could have used was give Nas, when he's faced away left like this, give Nas a little jab to the left, and then Nas will jump out to cut off the left drive. And then from there, he can use that spin pivot I mentioned. And even if he uses the spin pivot and he spins over here, but then Nas recovers, comes back over, and he doesn't really have a clean lane to the rim, Friga doesn't have to drive out of it. He can just use the spin pivot to manipulate Nas's position. Like right here's a good example. Kobe has the ball, and then he does that spin pivot, but doesn't drive straight out of it, but instead just gets the defender to shift position. And something I noticed was even though Nas denied Friga's rocker step and rip through to the right by not letting him face up, when Friga was able to face up, the rocker step worked actually. So like right here, he jabs around, this kind of jabbing to manipulate Nas's position so that he can like create space for a face up, just attack a different angle, make him respect other options. Really, I think is what Friga needed to do throughout this game, but particularly pertaining to the rocker step, right here, he hits Nas with it and it worked. So when Friga did face up, one of his go-tos, the rocker step, like it was there, he had it. And Nas did adjust. He did adjust at one point. I remember Friga used the rocker step twice. Yeah, right here. So Friga tries to hit Nas with the rocker step again, and then Nas kind of sits on it. An easy counter for that move, you rocker step and then cross. Like, you do a crossover out of the rocker step. And again, hindsight's 2020. Friga, he has his game. He has the moves he's comfortable with, and then there's the moves that he's not as comfortable with that he would have to work on. But this is just one of those options that it's pretty accessible, kind of easier to pick up, I think. If you know how to do the rocker step, I don't think it's that hard. So like right here, this is a good example of kind of a rocker step cross. Yeah, that's tough. Maybe it wasn't a rocker step, maybe it was just more of a rip through into a cross, but yeah, you get the point. You can just easily just add that like little shimmy to it, and then it's a rocker step cross. Now the third pattern to the mechanical analysis was that Friga didn't pressure Nas. Like look how far back Friga's playing on Nas compared to right here. Like look how far back Friga is compared to when Friga has the ball. Look how close up Nas is. And in fact, like I showed you earlier, Friga, when he would jump out to try to catch the ball with separation, Nas jumps out with him. Whereas Nas, yeah, Friga's giving him space the entire game. He's giving him space to work with, get a step and momentum downhill, and also giving up the shot, which is really what killed him. And the refs were letting them play pretty physically too. They were letting, like right here, Friga at the top makes his move, and then at the top, Nas gives him a shove with, that might have been with 2 hands, honestly. And it's not called. In a lot of other settings, especially NextChapter, I think a 2-hand shove like that at the top of the move would be called. But this game, the whistle was loosened up. I think it's partially because the previous game, Skoob versus Rob, which was amazing, by the way. I'm going to break that down for sure. But that game was so physical, and it influenced the refs to loosen up the whistle already. So they came into this game with a looser whistle. They weren't calling as much contact. And Nas was able to take advantage of that because he was playing up the entire game. Like from the moment Friga catches the ball, Nas is making Friga feel him. So the higher physicality that the refs were allowing, Nas was able to take full advantage of it because he was playing up, whereas Friga wasn't able to take advantage of it, at least not while Nas is in the triple threat. So that heightened physicality generally would just play to Nas' advantage because he's stronger. But with their strategy, it especially played into Nas' advantage. And then when Nas started hitting shots with the space Friga was giving up, Friga didn't adjust. Nas really went on a devastating run and kind of broke the game open right here, I think. So he hits that first 3. Now it's 9-2. That already looks pretty bad. And then look how Friga adapts. So he starts closer. Wow, that was so tough. That was really tough. So yeah, Friga tried to start a little closer up here, but it wasn't really enough to make Nas feel any pressure at the top of his move or in the triple threat. And then right here, this is a video Nas uploaded right before he played Friga. And it's kind of like a training session for the game with Skoob. And something I noticed, when I watch it back, something I noticed is that Nas is checking up like pretty far. And I actually think it's because with how Friga's played defense in the past, he anticipated Friga would give him space, like give him a cushion like he usually does. So Nas knew that if he checks up pretty deep, like he is right here, Friga wouldn't play all the way up and eat that space. Instead, he would give up the shot from that range, which I haven't seen Nas take that shot a ton. I see no reason to think he couldn't hit it, but yeah, I think Nas anticipated Friga's defensive game plan. He knew Friga wasn't gonna meet him up all the way back here, and because of that, Nas worked on this shot because he knew it'd be available. And if he's hitting it, it breaks the game open. It destroys Friga's defensive game plan, destroys how Friga's used to guarding. And also, when you correctly anticipate how something's gonna look, you can visualize it, and visualization is huge. Like that really shouldn't be underestimated. So Nas correctly anticipates how Friga's gonna guard him. He's working on that shot in the gym. You saw it in that video with Skoob. And then he's visualizing that shot in the game, like at the same time. He sees how it's gonna look and then play out before it even happens. And that visualization allows him to prepare for it on just another level. Another thing was Nas had the endurance advantage. Like, I think he generally just has the endurance advantage, and this game shows it because if I could find the comment, yeah, if I recall correct, yeah, right here, Dev in the lab says that this game lasted 88 minutes, which is crazy. So Nas has excellent endurance. And on top of that excellent endurance, whenever physicality is initiated between Nas and Friga, because Nas is stronger, he's not going to have to expend as much energy to battle Friga's strength. Whereas Friga is going to have to expend a lot of energy to fight off Nas's strength. And Friga's no slouch in terms of endurance, but I don't think he would last an 88-minute 1v1 like Nas did there. And on top of that, with the shots Nas was taking, because he was killing Friga on jumpers mostly, that conserves a lot of energy as opposed to like these high-speed drives towards the rim. And Friga particularly was just like a lot of his attack, like it looked like full speed sprints downhill. Let me try to find it. Yeah, a lot of time he was just like full speed sprinting downhill. And that expends more energy than Nas, who was kind of just taking the free open jump shots that were there. Okay, so now we're on to the mental analysis finally. And here, I mean, just listen to this quote. Where Friga's talking about Nas.
Collapses under the weight of chaos.
So right there, Friga says eventually, and he's alluding to Nas, collapses under the chaos or like the weight or whatever he said. But collapse, like focus on that. So first, like Nas made diamonds with the pressure that was on him. Like in my previous video, which was a prediction of the matchup before it happened, I said the stakes were favorable. Like they were in Friga's favor because as long as he could keep it somewhat close, he had less to lose and a lot more to gain because then if he beat Nas there, he would be viewed as number one. Whereas Nas, he didn't have as much to gain because he was already largely viewed as the number one player, and that would just still be the case after he beats Friga. And then he had a lot to lose because if Friga beats him, that's a huge upset, and then he gets knocked off the top spot. So the pressure was on Nas. And like I said, Nas just happened to craft diamond out of it. And on the mental side of the game, I think Friga's strategy was to kind of load the pressure onto Nas. Like he recognized that Nas had more to lose and less to gain in the matchup, so the pressure is asymmetrically on him. And he tried to load even more of that pressure onto Nas in the hopes that he would crack. Like right here, he says like Nas has to win or something.
It's not just that he wants to win. He needs to.
Yeah, right there. And in my previous video where I gave a prediction of this matchup, I talked about a scenario in which Friga wins, and that also banked on Nas kind of struggling to handle the pressure, the stakes, and the context of everything. But instead, Nas handled that pressure perfectly. In fact, just rose to the occasion, tall as it was, and put up that amazing historic performance.
But it always forgets the dirt it came from.
Yeah, so right there. Conversely, Friga was talking a lot of trash, and that might have been on the mental dimension of the game, kind of undoing, because when he's talking a lot of trash, he's saying like, oh, Nas isn't going to know what to do when I take the throne from him when he falls off his number one spot. Like, it's going to be a hard fall from grace. It's going to be humbling. He was talking so much trash, and then that kind of created a standard that now he had to play up to. Like it loaded some pressure onto him, and now he has a standard that he has to meet in his Nas game. Whereas before, he kind of had low stakes because he had a lot to gain and little to lose. Well, now because he's talking himself up so much, he has a standard. He has expectations to meet, and that actually created a context in which he did have a lot to lose. So I think when Nas comes out the gate firing offensively and is just blowing up Friga's offensive and defensive game plan, and Friga has no answer, the game's quickly getting out of control, and he's talked himself up so much that he's created some expectations he has to play up to. All of that, like, it just, like, the weight of the situation just dawned on him as Nas was basically blowing him out. And yeah, I mean, you saw the intensity Friga came out with at the start. And it definitely looks absent here, just like halfway through the game during halftime. The next pattern of the mental analysis was that it didn't seem like Friga was playing as freely. Like, he wasn't getting into his bag. I didn't see one hezi from him throughout the entire game. Like, no mid-range shots, but that could have been a product of how Nas was just guarding him. No real escape moves out of the triple threat. Like, that's another interesting thing. Because throughout the game, the issue was Friga didn't have space. Like, he couldn't face up towards the rim. Nas was eating up all that space the entire time. So it's kind of curious why Friga didn't try using a dribble to take a step backwards. So like this possession right here, I think is a good example of like what Friga looks like when he's playing a little more freely. So like this little like pivot right here, this pivot back to the left, bound out to the side. So that's one of the space creation moves that I was just talking about. Like, why not take a step back and then maybe attack Nas while he's trying to close that distance and you have a live dribble. And then the hezi, yeah, he hezis out of it too.
And hopefully finish it out.
Yeah, and then the hezi right there. So, like, that's what Friga looks like. That's when he's playing freely. And I saw 0 hezis. I didn't see any creative pivot work in the triple threat. I think mentally he just wasn't comfortable, didn't feel relaxed or poised enough to get into all of his counters, the rest of his bag. And then this possession also shows how
Finish it out.
Friga, when he's faced away to the left, he doesn't have to do that jab and shoulder bump into the defender's body. He doesn't have to do that. He can just like bound out in a separation move, step back, and then create out of that. Like this possession right here shows that like he can think of that. He has it in his bag at least somewhat, but he wasn't using that at all against Nas, even though his issue throughout the entire game was that he had no space to work against Nas. Now, Nas very well might have just like jumped out and met him, and then Friga bounds out, wastes a dribble, and then Nas is still there. He only has 3 dribbles left, sure. But when nothing else was working, I think that's definitely worth a try. To close this video, for the last topic I'm going to explore on the mental analysis is that the playing environment also kind of changed up on Friga. So for one, like they allowed higher physicality. Hold on, so like right here at the top of the move, Nas gives him like a 2-hand shove right there. I think on like most of the time on NextChapter, that's getting called. But like I said, my theory is that the previous game, Rob and Skoob kind of forced the refs to loosen up their whistle, and then that carried into this game. But the whistle, the refereeing was just different than Friga's used to on NextChapter. And he's played in more physical environments before, but lately he's mostly just been playing on NextChapter. So that's what he's adapted to, and that's also what he expected. I also think this 1v1 was much higher intensity than Friga's maybe ever played. I think honestly, highest intensity 1v1 Friga's ever played. And higher intensity, especially when you consider how many people there are in the gym, higher intensity than he's used to playing on NextChapter. And like you can see right here, Nas sends it into halftime. And then look at everyone who comes over to Friga's side and starts taunting him. So Nas comes over, starts taunting Friga, and then Nas's side comes over and starts taunting Friga. Like, I think that's just a different intensity than Friga's, like, really ever played in before. Because Friga's played in environments where everyone was rooting against him before, yeah. Like, when he visits the city, like, this is Tulsa, so, like, the crowd is largely, like, kind of riding with Burke. But at the same time, they don't hate Friga. Or, I mean, I don't think people during the Nas game hated Friga. But like, they're not so hostile towards Friga that when he hits this shot, they're just, like, saying nothing, you know? Like, sure, there's, like, Burke's side and everything, but a lot of the city, yeah, they were hype. I mean, I'm presuming that all of these people are not just straight people from outside of Tulsa who Friga brought over. Like, I think a lot of these people, like this kid right here, I mean, he's an OKC fan. A lot of these people, like, were riding with Burke, but when Friga hit that shot, they respect it, and they're willing to have that excited reaction to it. Meanwhile, in the Nas matchup, and oh yeah, real quick, yeah, look how Nas gained Friga. Gained Friga on Friga's own signature, that sidestep to the right, and then that's how he beats him. I think he did that on purpose. But yeah, like Nas hits that shot and there's a whole half of the gym that is just like dead quiet. And if Friga were to game Nas on a shot, the other half of the gym would have been dead quiet. So it's a different atmosphere than like when Friga goes out to cities and visits like Tulsa, because if Friga hits a cool shot for game, they're at least willing to react. But in this game, there's a whole half of the gym that if Friga were to hit a shot like that on Nas for game, they'd be as quiet as this. I think that's one indication that it was just a different level of intensity. Because when Friga goes out to those cities, it's kind of like a well-known person on the internet coming out to visit them. So there's sort of that factor to it. And I don't see why any city would particularly have beef with Friga. Whereas, like, in this matchup, it makes a lot of sense that Nas and his crew would have beef with Friga. So yeah, it was just a different level of intensity. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for seeing my second video through. The process behind this one was quite different than my first video, as that one was like rigidly and entirely scripted. So I tried something more spontaneous and less scripted with this video, and I'm happy with how it turned out. Conversing with a camera is still a little awkward for me, but I do like the fluidity of this like pseudo reaction brainstorm format. So if you're interested in more content like this, my breakdown of the Skoob vs Rob 1v1 is dropping very soon. Super excited for that one and hope to see you there, but for now, I'll catch you guys.